Hey everybody, this is Let's Play 2025 July week 4, and I'll be finishing up my piece this week. I'm showing you where I'm starting. I got my chess pieces and my card motifs basted down, and I rebasted the checkerboard, and I'm gonna start stitching them all. And I also, of course, have the silky cord to put around the checkerboard. I'll get that done too. I'll show you how I'm taking care of that. And I guess that's it till I make some progress. I'm just doing running stitches around this and the pieces and these pieces. And I will show you how I'm going to deal with the black on black here. Okay, well, I'll get started. I've made some progress. I did the stitching of the motifs from the cards. That's all finished. I've blind stitched most of the way around the checkerboard, and I did blind stitching black in the black squares and red for the red squares. And that wasn't as hard as you might think. I didn't finish it off every time I switched colors. What I did is I would come up and stop on the last stitch that I needed to do for that color. And as you can see, I was using 2 needles, one with each of a different color. And then when I was switching colors, I gotta put that down for a sec. When I was switching colors, I would take the previous color, stand up and make sure you're seeing this, and I would go down and take that last stitch to the back, like so. And then on the back, I would carry over, I would be able to see, I could see where the next color was already stitched, so then I would carry over the thread between the layers. Oops. To almost where I needed to come up. And then I would come up with the first stitch of the next piece, the next square, like so. And then I would stitch across, I'll stitch across, and I just kept doing that all the way around, and it worked really well, as you can see. And next I'll be adding the cording around the edge. I'm not going to couch this cording, I don't think. I think what I'm going to do is catch a little bit of the cord from underneath and stitch it down that way. And I also think, a plan, to start and stop the cording at a corner. So I can tuck it under the corner, or I don't know, we'll try. Or maybe at an inner block, but just so that I can tuck the end underneath the stitching so that I don't have to take it through to the back. Something like that, but I'll share more of that when I get to that part. Okay, I'm sharing some progress. I did the running stitch around the chest pieces, and I did add a single strand of embroidery floss in a stem stitch around just the top edge of the pawn to distinguish it from the queen. What ended up happening is it kind of tucked behind. You can see the red there. I'm not going to do any more. That's all I'm going to do. It wasn't meant to tuck behind. And then for the checkerboard, for all I was saying I wasn't going to couch it, I ended up couching it. So here's what I first did. I couched every at the where the checkerboard changed using my thickest pearl cotton, and I just did 1 stitch around each one, but I didn't like how that was sort of too shiny or something, But going around it with more stitches with the thick one, I knew I wouldn't like either. So I used my thinnest pearl cotton, and I've gone back in and I've taken 3 more stitches between each of the others two. Sorry, that didn't come out clear. Between each thick stitch, I've taken 3 more stitches. I still have this side and this side to do, but you can see it on the first 2 sides. So I'll show you what it looks like with the 1 stitch. And then here is what it looks like with the stitches in between. Sorry, the lighting isn't great. I think you can get that idea. All right, I'm going to finish that up and get my card started. I finished the checkerboard. I've got my checkers on stitched down. And now I'm moving on to the cards, which has gone through a bit of a development off camera. I'll walk you through it. Here is one of the cards all ready to stitch on here. And here's how I went through the process. I first decided, I actually only had 2 patches on that fabric that had this design. So I had to kind of be careful about, you know, I couldn't flub it and expect another one to be there. So when I knew where I wanted the design, and I knew that because I used, isn't this the cutest little deck of bicycle cards in my favorite color? I adore this little deck. Since I can play solitaire on my iTouch, I don't use it as much because shuffling is a pain, but this is where I used my sizing from. And in this case, there was like almost a 1/4 inch all the way around in the white, creamy white. So that's how I originally did my templates. I did it so that it was going to have a pretty good size white border. And then when I I made this one exactly like that, and the white was just too much. But I had already stitched down the centerpiece, so after over fussing for over a day, I decided I could probably get away with just trimming it and doing 1/8 of an inch around, and that is much better. I do like that much better. So I'm going to stick with that. Okay, now what I did is I took my center piece, that's to be the fabric, and the cardboard that I cut it out of, I saved so that I had in 2 versions of the same shape. One I could see in the middle, and then this template I couldn't. And I used it, and along with once I decided what my drawing was going to be, so I drew my shape around that, and then figured it out where on the fabric it was going to be. So I traced it so that when I was cutting my second piece of fabric, I could trace it, like I could make sure it was exactly the same design, so they're pretty close to the exact same design, so they would look like they came from a deck of cards, like a deck. Okay, so then I took my piece and I centered it on top of the white fabric I was going to use this way, and I cut a piece of batting, scrap batting, that was just slightly smaller. And the reason I went for the batting instead of just a cup, I need to do at least a couple of layers of white so that when it sits on the black fabric, you can't see the black through. But I tried a couple layers and you could still see the darkness. So I thought the best version was with the batting behind. So I basted those together, and I stitched the center down with a blind stitch, and then took my basting stitches out, and I basted the edges at the 1/4 inch size, and that's when I decided I didn't like that. So now I've got this. See, I haven't even trimmed the fabric back. Yeah, what I did is I came in after where it was stitched, and I just trimmed the batting even more to about as close to the stitching as I could, and then that allowed me to just fold over the edges to be approximately a 1/16 of an inch away from the center. So that's what I'm going to do now. And then I have to decide. I'm not 100% sure now if this is where I want them or not. I'll have to decide that when I have the second one done, because just pretending like this, it's not really giving me the exact size of it. So if I can, I would like to have some of this show and some of this stay. So I might overlap more than I think. I don't know. I have to play with it, but it has to be ready to look the same before I know. For all I know, I'm going to move them down here. I don't know. I'm going to play. And then, just so that you know, I still have the 5 dice that I'm going to put here as a sort of Yahtzee thing. And I don't know. These are just have been calling me from the time I started this. There's such interesting buttons. That kind of reminds me of a pool game. It's a suggestion of a pool, that triangle in a pool game. So I'm not really sure. I might add these, maybe not. Maybe I don't need anything else. Though, funny enough, I don't know, but I also have these daisies with red and black centers that if I feel like filling up a corner, I might put a selection. I don't know. They're kind of in my mind as a possibility of sticking it some in each corner. I'll have to play with it when I'm ready. And the other, I did mean to show you this when I was talking templates. Let's get these out of the way. Here's when I cut out this. I didn't use scissors. I didn't mean to leave it this tiny either. If I was going to do it again, I would leave a thicker frame because this was fussy. But what I wanted to show is I save sometimes, well, I don't go through that many, but I have some old cutting mats that I've broken into smaller pieces, and that's what I save for when I use my craft knife to cut. And that's how I cut this out, with a ruler. I cut it out with a craft knife. It's just so much easier. Just thought I'd share that repurposing old cutting boards can give you another life. I would not want to use the craft knife on my better cutting board at the moment because I want this one to last a long time. So since this one was already awful, I didn't feel bad about breaking it up and using smaller pieces of it for when I cut paper or whatever with my craft knife. Okay. Breathe. I'll come back when I've got the cards ready and I've got that sorted out and I'm a little further along. I've run out of time and I need to get the video uploaded for you, and I'm not quite finished. And I decided I'm not going to rush myself through the rest of it because I want it to be, I want to enjoy what it is in the end, and I didn't feel I had the time to sort of live with ideas for a day or two. And I have the bonus of July has a 5th Thursday, so I can show it next week. I was going to use next week to share some news with you, but I'll do both. I'll show you the finished piece and I'll share news. I got the cards done. I like that a lot. And I am going to put that button right there. And this is what else I didn't get a chance to do yet is I'm going to, with a stem stitch and probably 2 strands of embroidery floss. Do this X's and O's game here. And I still haven't done the dice beads either, so I've got that to do and decisions about anything else. So, but I'm liking it so far. It's definitely a game themed highly lovely black and red and white. Okay, thanks for watching. If you like it, you know, like, sorry, I feel weird asking for that, but it does help me find audience through YouTube. Okay. Yes, I am enjoying this. I will see you next week.